session, we will discuss the prospects for APEC cooperation in this area of higher education and define means for fostering strong and vibrant learning systems in regional educational environment with the view of their new challenges that we've faced recently, including but not limited to current COVID-19 pandemic, and taking into account that each of our countries have something to offer and to best practices to exchange and the new technological solutions to offer. And with that, allow me to give the floor to our first speaker, Her Excellency Leonor Briones, Secretary of Education of the Republic of the Philippines. Really happy to see you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. On behalf of the Department of Education, my own country, and on my own behalf as well, we are grateful and thankful for the honor of sharing with you perspectives on cooperative solutions and sustainability. Excellencies, I'd like to share my presentation. As we all know, global school closures have been massive. 1.4 billion learners were affected in 172 countries worldwide. As of October 24, we still have 34 countrywide closures due to COVID-19. In Southeast Asia, countries have already opened their schools. We are also aware, and this has been mentioned by earlier speakers, that COVID-19 has exacerbated and widened the digital divide within and across countries, especially with the demands of digital learning. And it has been mentioned that students without reliable internet access struggle to participate in the learning process. Also, the challenge is to develop general ability to learn with knowledge and skill for solving real-world problems and challenges. It is in this context that I would like to share our reflections on 5 discussion topics which were identified by the organizers of this conference, which can be the subject of discussion. One is, what are the directions for education as suggested? Well, we have observed that learning systems are sustained in many regional education networks. For example, the European Commission is implementing the Digital Education Action Plan to learn from the unprecedented changes in global education due to the pandemic. In Southeast Asia, for example, the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, or SEMIO, of which the Philippines is part of, has been conducting webinars extensively discussing responses, best practices, exchanging experiences on different aspects of education. They also have developed a portal for open education resources and massive open online resources free to be accessed by those who are interested. Furthermore, the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, of which, again, the Philippines is part of, is very active here. The second topic which has been suggested is developing education cooperation strategies to enhance futures education. We are all aware that most of us, if not all of us, have been moving into the direction of education of futures, even without COVID. And so in 2015, for example, OECD already launched the Future of Education and Skills 2030 project, which aims to set goals and develop a common language for pedagogy and learning. UNESCO's Futures of Education, which has been extensively shared by most countries, This initiative aims to rethink education and shape the future, whether it is after COVID, and it was started even before COVID. In this world of increasing complexity, uncertainty, and precarity. The third discussion topic which has been suggested is how do we meet the challenges of rapid change in ICT, and how do we define educational prospects. In Africa, for example, it is reported, and I can be corrected, 89% of learners do not have access to household computers, and 82% lack internet access. The differences, the divide between and among countries and regions is very perceptible. With the shift from face-to-face learning, which we were used to, especially in my own country, to remote learning of what we describe as flexible learning options in universities and tertiary education, the pandemic has introduced unprecedented challenges for ICT. So member countries, for example, of the Association for the Development of Education in Africa, or ADEA, so they need to develop a comprehensive remote education policy to set up IT and multimedia structures, to upskill teachers' policy, and to set up IT and education in the universities in the area. Not all universities in the Middle East and North Africa have been able to shift to online learning as quickly as expected. And one emerging issue is the credit recognition of the certificates earned by students in massive open-line courses. If universities can give students credit for the currently free university courses offered by MOOCs, this could save substantial resources. A fourth topic for discussion which has been suggested is how do we encourage talents and facilitate international practices of exchange. And this is a very popular and common practice between and among regions as well as between countries themselves, or even within countries also. But COVID-19 has severely affected the movement not only of students, but also of professors, also of those who are setting up ICT structures, and has put many of these practices to a full stop. In my country, for example, when a lockdown was declared by our government early on, more than 9,000 university students were in a sense detained, or they had to stay in Manila, and they were in a sense also trapped and unable to go home because of the restrictions on travel. So we really need digital cooperation strategies to ensure high quality and also enrich equity of education. We in the Philippines and CCHE, for example, in UNESCO, we are very concerned about equity issues. Local governments in my country, for example, are financing, giving digital devices, helping schools in their localities, and this has resulted in equity problems between and among poor local government units vis-a-vis those who are relatively wealthy, between and among urban and rural schools, and also has widened further the gap between and among private schools as well as public schools. And therefore, you would suggest that as we discuss these 5 topics, perhaps equity is the most urgent and the most important. After all, these problems this challenge has existed even before COVID. Again, we need to develop and to enrich sustainable learning systems, for regional education, but also we consider bilateral exchanges, which is also very popular and is practiced between and among countries. Think of futures education, meet the challenges of rapid change in ICT and the equity challenges that they present, encourage movement of students, of faculty, of technicians, of scientists between and among countries which are locked down and which have quarantine procedures, travel restrictions, and also to modify digital cooperation strategies to ensure high quality and, as I repeatedly say, equity in education. Thank you very much, Excellencies.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Indeed, a very deep speech, and you've raised a number of very important points, including the ones of how much, with what difference we all entered into this challenging times. Because you've mentioned that while the countries of the north, like Switzerland or Austria, have less problems with regards to offering their students digital education because they don't have such a huge gap in terms of offering access to internet, to having the computers in families, in schools. It's up to 95 provision. Developing countries in Southeast Asia, in Asia-Pacific region as a whole, and it's, as you demonstrated, even worse in Africa. They are lacking basic infrastructure, ICT infrastructure, to allow for necessary inclusion, for the kids to continue their education. It's an extremely important point. It adds to the topics that we're discussing, and this also has to be raised and tackled as one of their priority issues. Thank you for that. And also you've mentioned a number of documents and concepts adopted by OECD, elaborated by UNESCO. Definitely APEC has to be also ahead with such work, because there are also specificities offered for Asia-Pacific region that needs to be attended by our regional community. That is why we also need to look more into those issues. Thank you so much once again.